Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Setting a Path Forward for a Digitized Media Landscape in Africa. The adoption rate of digital technology in Africa is remarkable. Just as we have witnessed before in sectors with no legacy infrastructure, such as mobile communication, the speed of Africa's digitization is leapfrogging other regions in the world and in the process shaping the landscape for digital media. Now, more access means more opportunities, but also new challenges. So today I have the privilege to join a conversation with two digital media players taking part in this new reality. My friend Ali Ramji, the managing editor of The Exchange in Nairobi, and Juan Carlos, the managing editor of Mozambique's O Económico. Welcome, Ali and Juan Carlos. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
So in the reality that we live today, misinformation is of great concern, as it can, and it did change the course of some of the world's largest economies. Getting a message across in a clear way becomes more and more challenging. So I wanted to start this conversation by asking the both of you, how do you see the responsibility of digital media in showcasing opportunities in Africa and driving more investments impacting the continent? Ali, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thank you, Fabio, and thank you, Your African Forum, for having me on this panel. I think when you look at the role of digital media, let's just lay down the role of media really is to tell the truth. And I think that with respect to showcasing the opportunities in Africa, you have a situation where the only way that you can communicate this to the international community today is through the medium of digital, through the internet. It has to be done online. And I think that digital media has a responsibility, or media in general has a responsibility, of telling the truth in a fashion that showcases what is happening on the continent. The problem is that we don't necessarily have, with other international media, the African voices telling the real story. All right. We only realized this recently with the likes of entities such as BBC that are actually setting up shop on the ground, and they have a bureau office in Nairobi that are now telling the African side of the story, but yet it is still catered toward those you could say fluff stories that perhaps the West is really looking for. The real essence come down to what is it that Africans are saying about Africa for the betterment of Africa and showcasing the investment opportunities on the ground. I mean, Africa is not a basket case. There are significant opportunities on the ground over there. I believe that these stories need to be told in a fashion that enables, foreign investors to actually see what is on the ground what is on the ground on the continent. The problem is that sometimes Western media doesn't necessarily want this. And because of that, we are in a situation that we are forced to really drive our agenda on the ground, on the continent, to demonstrate the value that Africa has to the international community. I mean, this is just an overarching perspective. But when you look at the question as you had presented, Fabio, the responsibility of digital media is really to highlight what the opportunities are on the ground. And Joao Carlos, I'd love to hear your response on this.
Yeah, I will start that noted my rationale regarding to that. In my opinion, as you will agree with me, is that the media is one of the most powerful tools of disseminating information, as you know. With that power comes responsibility on behalf of both producer and the consumer. So information from the media must be absorbed, taking into account the awareness of the extent to which it creates and perpetuates deep paradigms that exist in our minds. Until now, the continent has been victim of negative coverage by the Western media, often portraying image associated with hunger, political instability, corruption, among other negative or investment retreating factors. It's necessary to change this paradigm. Greater engagement is needed in promoting a positive coverage. a positive narrative, a series of inspiring and uplifting and positive stories from across the African continent. Essentially, in addition of good news and success stories about the continent aim at promoting investment. So, what regarding that? So the question arises to ask probably to what extent can digital media contribute to that in this regard? This will be my next insights. So for now, I will I will stop from here and listen to our friends here. So what their ideas, or if they really understand my talking notes.
Great. Thank you, Jean
Can I
Carlos.
can I
I
just
think that
add
we
to
all
can I
agree.
just add to this, Fabio? Sorry,
Sure,
I just
please.
want to add something. You know, Fabio, I mean, Jean Carlos, I agree with what you're saying. But I also believe that there is a responsibility by the media to end up telling the truth in a way that also showcases the reality. Yes, we have corruption. Yes, we have war. Yes, we have, rape and pillaging, and we have these major issues. But these major issues should not necessarily be dominating the scene with which Africa is, because there are many good stories to tell. But I don't believe that just telling the fluff and the real positive stories alone are what drives or what will drive investments. I think that telling the truth is important, but also demonstrating a balance, beyond the stories of rampant corruption and beyond the stories of violence and so forth. Because the reality is that there is violence in other parts of the world, there is corruption in other parts of the world, but the problem is that Western media and Western perspectives are dominated by those stories. And I think it is the responsibility of us here, in Africa, to really drive the true agenda. Yes, there are problems, but so what? There are so many opportunities, and it is these opportunities that need to be highlighted more. So this is what I wanted to highlight. So sorry to interrupt you, Fabio.
No, not at
No,
all. I mean, I
that's
was going
true.
to say,
Yeah, that's true. I'm not meaning that we have to cover up the negative stories about art because they exist in fact, and the media is about the truth. So we will not go and try to cover it to some way divert the public opinion from that. That's true and that's happened and must be reporting. But there are other many good stories about Africa that do not come on the Western media.
right. I mean, I know that we
Uh,
dove into those differences. Let me just jump in there because I think I have there's an interesting insight in here. We all agree that when reporting Africa, perhaps international media outlets, that they're not always aligned with what we see on the ground. But I got a feeling that a lot of the times this is due to some sort of lack of integration. So I just wanted to throw that question there. Can African media engage with global media in terms of setting up a more candid picture of the developments and the news impact? I know you mentioned BBC in the beginning, Ali, but perhaps even the way they do that is sort of westernized. I mean, how can we create
Yeah.
more integration to sort of address this issue?
Well, I mean, I think that it's not really the integration of the issue. Look, we have journalists on the continent, very good journalists across Africa. And we see a lot of these that are being, hired by, CNN Africa, and you have the, CNN, uh, you know, Africa correspondent, and we have the BBC Africa correspondent, the Reuters Africa correspondent. Look, that alone is not the only way of looking at engaging with global media. I think that, you have different sort of perspectives um, from different media, but it depends on what the global media wants. What do the Western media, what are the stories that the Western media want to highlight? Do they want to end up getting a candid picture, in reality? That's something that one needs to end up, asking. I think the other thing is that setting up bureau offices, there's an opportunity for potential bureau offices across the continent that can end up driving news that adds value to the real truth or the essence of what is happening on the continent. And there aren't really bureau offices that are doing that, apart from the Reuters bureau, the AFP, and the AP entities, and so forth. But it's these bureaus that can really potentially partner with the foreign media entities. The other thing is also with engaging with global media, or engaging with Western media, you can always look at the exchange of content, like content partnerships, to drive the local voice. And that is something that is very prevalent and very promising for many of the African media, because media globally is suffering from an economic downturn, because print publication has decreased, advertising revenue has decreased. The way that Google also ends up paying its publishers has decreased significantly. But there are ways of driving the right type of eyeballs, and those eyeballs can be done by content exchange, or even selling content and engaging in a partnership. So I think there are different ways of looking at how to engage, uh, but that engagement needs to end up having mutual benefit, both for the local media but also for the international audience that is viewing those stories.
Juan Carlos, what's your take? Engagement with global media.
Yeah.
Do you think that will
Well,
provide a clearer picture?
okay. Yeah. First of all, we have to be aware that there's an unbalanced situation between the local media, African media, and Western media. We all know that media is depending also depends on the resources, and the many African based media a lack of resources. So they engage in the manner with global media in the way that they just follow some script that interests the Western media. That's why they cannot uh, uh, they cannot shortlist some kind of theme that they are not being approval by the Western media group. So we have to start by looking at this unbalanced situation. In other way, we all know that the current dynamics of segregating country into discourse of the versus undeveloped, rich versus poor, victims versus not victims, has a negative implication on several levels. The current image of Africa in the Western media is not something self-portrayed. It's not what you see. It's what you get. As the media condition molds and monopolize this image, reference to Africa are sometimes received with disdain and contempt. Given the growing information about Africa, the need to broaden the world's vision of the continent becomes increasingly pressing and pertinent. That's my opinion in that matter. The situation where you see the Western media convince I mean, how can I explain it better? What the Western media convey is significantly limited, and it's up to all of us to be aware of this at first, and to take initiatives aimed at solving the problem. So I see this to be addressed in these two levels. recognizing the fact that they are an unbalanced situation, lack of resources from the local media. So the situation do not allow they to broadcast the good narrative about the continent. And good narrative here is not avoiding the bad things that have been occurred in Africa. Is tell all the picture, all the things that happen. Africa is growing. Africa is attracting investments. Africa is a business hub. Africa is has a lot of potential for investment trading. Africa is one of the main resources of raw material for all the Western industries. So this should be bring about the the opportunities that Africa has to put under media, even in the local media, we have this situation, and this is very tricky point because even internally in continent, we tend to see this negativity between ourselves sometimes. So we have to change this mindset, right? Well,
Right.
Fabio, and Ali, that's my point of view on this at this moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you, João Carlos. I think that obviously there is a bias, there is an agenda, and I'm actually, we're going to get to it. I just want to take a little step back. We were talking about global engagement, how can we address some of these issues? I know that Ali brought up, the bureaus and the different agencies that come into the ground, but I can't help to think that there are opportunities for Africans to grow in the media space, particularly because of the digitalization. And I think that when you mix, Ali, you mentioned the bureaus, but I mean, I'm no expert, but a lot of times I see, a Dutch agency sending a Dutch journalist with Dutch visions and Dutch bias. And I'm saying Dutch, but I could be saying German, I could be saying any other Western country. They come with their vision, their bias. There's no integration. What I do see here, I think that there's a great opportunity for African youth and African professionals. So I wanted to ask, don't you see, do you guys see like that there are opportunities brought by this media digitization that can help African players become global players? Try to sort of like, flip that coin, try to take African media and start to projecting them into a more global role, if you will. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to look at it like this. It depends on what sector or what arena that you're looking at with respect to media digitalization, and putting these African media houses, on the map at an international level. I think that there are significant opportunities, but you have to ask yourself: is it the telling of the news? Is it music? Is it culture? What is it exactly? The beauty is that internet penetration is increasing on the continent. And Africa is not a homogenous sort of, continent. It is made up of 55 different countries. And because of this, there are challenges, but what we do see is that there are opportunities to really tell the African story. Now, um, beyond storytelling, I believe that it's this tool alone that is the opportunity to enable Africans and to enable the whichever media entity to drive their respective platform to a different level. And I'll give you an example. There was a Nigerian sort of platform known as iRoko, and they listed on the London Stock Exchange not too long ago. The interesting thing is that the growth of Nigerian media, or you could say Nigerian movies, Nollywood, it's taken interest in even East Africa, and people don't realize that it's entertainment, but this entertainment is enabling them to list on, an international stock exchange. It's enabling them to drive significant growth, and that aspect of digitalization that is penetrating different segments of society among all the different rungs of society, is allowing these companies to play at the world stage, but still, all right, across the continent. So I think that it depends on which way you want to look at it. Another good example is DPO, which is direct pay. It was bought out by a UAE-based company about two years ago, Network International. And direct pay started out of South Africa. They managed to raise capital on the continent, but it was a South African digital payments sort of a payment gateway. All right, and you end up having the DPO being bought out by a couple $100 million, and it took it across the continent. Similarly, you have Flutterwave. All right, now these are fintech companies that still fall within the realm of digitization, not necessarily media digitization, but do fall within digitalization. I think that it depends on which sectors you look at. Within the world of media tech, um, and I'm using that term loosely with media digitalization. I think that there are opportunities, specifically with music. All right, not to necessarily say that you're going to have a competitor to Spotify or anything of the sort. I know that Jay-Z also invested in a platform. Jay-Z, and I believe it was Akon, that invested in an African media or African music platform similar to Spotify, and it's moving, but it hasn't necessarily hit it that big. One that has is Medundo, okay, and they're based out of Nairobi. They listed on the Dutch Nasdaq, and they raise capital, and they're taking the world by storm. And I think that what they're doing is really putting Africa on the map, because today we see African music uh, penetrating the sounds of even Western music today. So it depends which area you're looking at in terms of media digitalization, but I think there are significant opportunities. It just requires one to understand what they want to end up targeting, what they want to end up creating. But there are, from a news perspective, there are as well, but it also depends on how many people want to end up understanding what is really happening on the continent.
João Carlos, what's your take? What's the strongest opportunities you see out there?
Well, I see digitalization as something that is putting a never ever seen for African engagement in the process across the world. I see this as a big opportunity for African media to set up a African narrative about the real stories of the continent. Both stories, the challenge that Africa is facing. We know that Africa has still have major challenge to be addressed, and the media should follow and should cover that. And I see also this as an unprecedented opportunity for Africa to set a media agenda across all the world about what real is going on in the continent. So regarding with what I've said before, lack of about the lack of resource for the local media, I see that digitalization allows with less resource in that way, still African and local media be able to tell the stories to the globe. So I think that the global village, in terms of globalization or materialization of what Marshall Lawson prophecy have said about village globalization, have a great opportunity with the digitalization. Of course, we still need to training our journalists. We still have to rethink the role of the international correspondent from the global media on the continent. Still have a lot of issues that need to be reshaped in regarding to address this challenge and take these opportunities in positive ways. So I think is a trigger and create an opportunity and precedent for the development of continental media or media across our country in Africa.
Great. Now, Ali, you show me your phone and you mentioned music, you mentioned movies. So I'm just going to have to hold myself into the mainstream impact digital media creates and moving to, I don't like to use the word digital democracy, but just for a second, I think that this digital democracy is changing the landscape of Africa very rapidly. There's a whole new market in the gig economy, again, for young Africans, but also the open access that you mentioned brings a number of cultural upsides and downsides. So I wanted to hear from you guys, how do you feel that this access to social networks and the everything now at your fingertips and the massive media stream impact, how do you feel that this impacts and shapes the next generation of Africans, the today youth, but also the youth of today are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. So how do you see that impact, negatives and positives, in your view?
I'm going to start with some negatives, all right? But I think that there are quite a number of positives. I think the negatives can potentially start with, you have Western, you have music, American music that glorified, you know, showing skin a lot more. Not that I'm opposed to that, but I think that you can deterioration of cultural values and norms in many of these African countries by seeing what they're, these music videos that we saw a few years ago, and we continue to see, coming out from the United States. And I think that what has happened is that this has um, this has penetrated among many of the youth today on the continent, that you start seeing the mimicking of what is happening in the West. Nothing wrong with that. But what the implications are is that there is a deterioration of cultural values and norms. What was once considered, the abnormal is now considered the norm. All right. So it can be seen as a negative, all right, but it can also be seen as, a positive, where you're having Western influence to drive so many other, economies. I think one needs to look at, the deterioration of those societal norms as, one major negative. The positives are this: music. You see the manner in which music videos are created. And today, you see how African artists have really adapted to this unique style of packaging a 4-minute song into a music video that today is some of these individuals, some of these artists like Diamond Platinum from Tanzania has over 150, 200 million views on one music video. And it's mind-boggling to see this. But the beauty is that when you look at a platform like YouTube, that social network and its or that social platform and its impact on just youth and culture is enormous. All right, and that is something that many can actually say that is added value, because it is not just music. It is also looking at, courses in Kiswahili, for example. I mean, you have some individuals who are looking at, these looking at YouTube and actually creating Swahili courses online. And it is also it has the ability to shape, not just future Africans, but also people from abroad, so that they're able to understand the local cultures over here. So it depends on which angle you look at it. The youth of Africa today are going to be influenced, no doubt, by Western media, specifically through Instagram and Facebook. What these platforms basically drive in terms of culture, and we all know that the sex and violence sells. But these are things that are going to be adapted by youth, because censorship laws do not necessarily exist in Africa as well. All right. To other platforms like YouTube, you're going to see the music coming in, but you're also going to see the videos and the way that skin is shown, and this is what is being adapted. So it depends on which way you want to see it. Significant impact, but there are positives and negatives.
Right. Before I bring João Carlos in, I just wanted to add something to what you said, Ali. We had a conversation before about the gig economy. Do you see that those channels are also opening new opportunities? Do you guys envision like a job market, sort of like a symbol where digital media actually becomes a means of subsistence? I mean, you actually witnessed
Yeah,
some
for
of that already,
sure.
right?
For sure. I mean, I mean, I've seen it already. Look, the gig economy is something that is definitely going to end up, um, you know, transcending the entire continent. I mean, it's penetrating every single corner of the continent. And you see this from, the mere sort of applications like Bolt and Uber, to other applications that are like, fundi.com or links, that really allow individuals to provide services online. I mean, before, way back in the day, in in North America, you end up having Craigslist, and today you end up having people basically using their phones to choose specific type of services in plumbing and in carpentry. So I do believe this aspect of the gig economy is definitely going to take over. I also believe that there's going to be a significant opportunity for people to really take on the opportunity among themselves for micro entrepreneurship within within this sort of world we call the gig economy, just because mobile penetration has increased. The cost of computing has decreased, or the cost of computers have decreased, and over time we see that internet penetration rates increasing significantly, even in rural areas. So all this is adding to not just the gig economy, but is adding to economic growth. But the leapfrogging that is taking place is enormous, and that is something that is another story that needs to be told. That will really drive some, or pique the interest of many Westerners, because the level of opportunities in this arena alone are enormous. And you see companies from Europe coming in, you see companies from the United States coming in. They just need to end up talking about the positive stories on that aspect, as to how it is adding value to driving unemployment down. All right. So insane opportunities in entrepreneurship with respect to individuals, uh, looking at the uptake of digitization through this notion of what we call the gig economy. But it needs to be perhaps regulated, or needs to be perhaps molded in a way that adds more value to the larger populations of the continent.
And sustainability as well. João Carlos, I'm sorry that I extended this question, but it would be great to hear from you, just as I asked Ali, both aspects, not only the impact, but how do you see the gig economy going forward, and shaping not only the culture, but also the means of existence for the future African generation?
Yeah, currently it's it's a very philosophical situation and a very philosophical answer to explain the current situation. What I can bring about is that the theoretical tradition about the effect of social networks on the transformation of the culture cannot be taken as uniform and valid for all countries. It's necessary to consider the dynamics and resilience of culture and the ability to negotiate foreign imports. So, in terms of upside, you can see digital media and gig economy. In addition to the cultural impact, digitalization has initiated a complete reshaping of the workforce for entrepreneurs, for all business area, culture, music, etc., etc. All areas have been reshaping from the digital media and gig economy. So we can realize that the social media model could serve as much greater purpose than connecting and long lost friends can be to drive, for instance, sales, to drive narratives, to drive business opportunities. And it's again, it's an unprecedented situation that has to be addressed in two ways. Regarding that. I can add that due to the digitalization, there are many more, as you know, self-employed workers currently. Everyone can notice it, everyone is aware of that. And we are seeing that the freelance apps are growing rapidly. People are looking for new ways to earn money, and the internet has given entrepreneurial and innovative answers. So this picture shows us that, in fact, we are going into a new paradigm that seems to be the gig economy and digital media. So that could be my regarding that, Fabio.
Thank you. Now, I know we are coming to the end of our conversation, and I mentioned before that there is an agenda on the West, at least that's my feeling. We all agree that there's some sort of double standard when it comes to reporting or to even internationalizing the image of Africa. So picking up on that line, there are a number of myths about Africa, giving it sometimes a very discouraging picture about the continent. We're talking about digital media. Just on this last segment, we spoke about the music, the movies, everything that's coming out. Definitely some Western medias that have an agenda that perhaps will help their corporations to operate in the way they operate in Africa. But I wanted to wrap this up with some thoughts about your feelings, about this double standard, but also the solutions, some of the solutions that can be applied where, African media and African youth could stand up to sort of change and portray a better image, a more real image of what the continent is and it has to offer. As you mentioned, there's a lot of bad everywhere else in the world, but there's a lot of good. And what can we do? You're all in media. What do you think can be done, both by media, but by general population, to actually change those myths, address those myths, now that we have all those tools? Why don't we start with Ali?
I think a lot of it could be.
Feel free to
when you
dream, huh?
hear
Please feel free to dream.
Sorry, feel free to dream.
I said, feel free to
I think
dream. Give us utopia.
okay. Before I come to a utopian perspective, I think we need to look at this very importantly. Where if there is a story that Western media portrays then it's an opportunity for African media to actually, jump on it. If it is a perspective that is not necessarily in the most positive eye of um, that respective country or of Africa, then it is the responsibility of the African media to basically highlight that and to indicate and call that media house out. The problem is that sometimes we don't always do this. We respectively have our own sort of agenda, and this as a someone who owns a media house with various publications, under our operations, we sometimes look the other way because we just we don't care because it doesn't really bother us. So I think that it comes down to, if there is something that would bother us, then we would end up raising that, and then highlighting what the truth really is, behind that. But the problem is that news is history. News today is history tomorrow, and I think that that is something that we realize, but we don't necessarily practice. But if Western media that has much more opportunities of influencing and bringing the eyeballs to their platforms talk about this, then that's where it will resonate for many more, you could say, months than what the current story is, even if we were to end up coming out with a positive perspective. Uh, there is perhaps a double standard. And I use the term perhaps, but this double standard, it's only our responsibility to really drive that. And if we are looking at highlighting the realities of what is happening on the ground, then more and more we will perhaps end up driving the interest from from those readers on Africa. But it also depends on how everything from the Google algorithm works to how Facebook's algorithm works, and sometimes we're just not privy, or we fall prey to the way that they dictate how media is portrayed or how the message is portrayed. And if they don't necessarily want anything, then they don't necessarily have to have, that on their platforms. And we will just fall under the layers of all the other news stories out there. The real story comes down to, in my mind, are we producing the right content? And if we are, then eventually those individuals will read it. The people who actually matter will read it, and the negative perspectives will end up washing out. Or even if they're there, let them continue to be there. And the way I look at it is, you will always have the naysayers, but it's those naysayers that will end up always giving a pushback. So if Western media is going to continue doing that, in my mind, let them continue doing it, because in the end, what it's doing is creating opportunities for others to actually say, look, you know what? This is what the Western media is saying. Let Africa end up building Africa on its own with other partners. And the truth of the matter is that they're doing this, and you have other, entities coming into the continent and basically taking up all the opportunities. So if Western media wants to continue to do that, and then they want to end up pointing fingers and saying that, oh yes, the way that China does business and the way that, Russia and India and so forth does business is not right, then that's because they already have a double agenda that they're not really seeing. So they're shooting themselves in the foot. It's a very interesting line that they're walking in.
João Carlos, this is a touchy subject.
Well,
I'm glad this is
Yeah, it
okay.
is.
Okay. In my closing remarks, I would like to stress that to bring in here the this perspective, the economic perspective. Starting by stressing that non-investment decision is taking into account, any investment decisions take into account two factors: the expected return and the investor's perception of risk. The media exerts a significant influence on both factors. That is, the potential is enormous. Economic actors need to accurate and timely information to efficiently allocate resources investors, and other groups add value and demand governance monitoring of the role of the media. So that comes to the fact that the media improve the efficiency of the providing decision makers and business leaders with quantity and quality information needed to make decisions and to improve stability. The development of the media sector is proposed in the proposed direction, reduce political risk, increasing stability and attractiveness for making investment in Africa. And for me, very important message to deliver in this webinar. I think it's a very important topic to be highlighted. And this role can only be played by free and independent press, which provide information and monitoring for the economic policy development process. For this is necessary, I end with this, is necessary to have a greater diversification of the media and an improvement of the economic viability and competitiveness of the sector, of the media sector in Africa. This is very important, and this take us to the beginning of our dialogue. That's to be what is needed to have the real narrative. I don't want to say the positive narrative, but the real narrative about the process of social and economic development of the African continent.
Thank you. For one, I think the Rio is actually positive. So I want to thank you both very much for sharing your views and insight. It's been great. And for everyone watching us, thank you for joining our conversation and have a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having me.